Hi, I'm Tom Ray from Lorenzo's Music Podcast, and I am here today to talk to someone from a music platform that I only recently discovered from another musician that I spoke to on this podcast. And I am here to hear more about it, learn more about it, and I'm kind of excited to do this. So why don't you tell the people who you are and what it is you do?
Hey, I'm Simon. I am a web developer. I play music, but mainly the reason I'm here is because I spend time working on a platform called Mirlo, which is a digital marketplace slash merch marketplace for music. So it's like Bandcamp, but it is collectively owned by the workers, and it's open source. So that's kind of the whole premise behind it.
Which is also one of the other reasons why I'm interested in it, because we're an open source band and a Creative Commons band. So finding
Mm.
platforms like this that are based on open source is really what I love to pursue and look into. So first of all, what I want to ask is, it's Mirlo. I keep switching it in my head. It's Mirlo.
It's technically it's Mirlo, but I
Okay.
think probably the only people who pronounce it like that are me and my co-owner. It's it's the Spanish word for blackbird.
Okay.
So a Mirlo
Oh,
is a blackbird.
that would explain the logo when you first go to the page. I was going to
Yeah,
ask about that next too, because it's even sort of the same thing in the icon for it and everything, like the favicon that's on there. Okay,
yeah.
that was my first question. Was it that, or is it just a misspelling of Merlot, like the wine?
Yeah, and it's funny because our branding uses like a kind of like off burgundy.
Right. That is exactly
So
why I thought that.
yeah, yeah.
So now this came about, and I'm trying to figure out where to start. Well, first of all, tell us exactly what the platform does.
hmm So it's a well, I mean, like honestly, like the best comparison is it's like Bandcamp.
Hmm.
It's a you sign up as a musician and you are able to upload your music. We've tried to make that as easy as possible because we realize, that's a hassle. A lot of people have a lot of
Yes.
music. Um, and you can sell your albums for a price or for free. And you can also sell merch for whatever you want. And Bandcamp also does this. Like it also has
Hmm.
support tiers like Patreon. But we've kind of made that a little bit more prominent than Bandcamp does because I don't think a lot of musicians actually use that functionality on Bandcamp. Um, and we're in early stages. We've only been up and running for a year.
Okay.
We've had about 600 musicians sign up for the platform. We're very, like I would say, we're pretty scrappy. We don't take and haven't taken like venture capital money,
Right.
which like that is like when Bandcamp got started in 2012 or whatever it was, they received I think it's about $5 million in investment, but like in
Hmm.
today's dollars, I think it was like 3 million or whatever then, but like an
Yeah.
equivalent of $5 million. We don't have that kind of money, so it's happening in our free time. It's and we're trying to like piece it together. It's also a like political project. We're kind of rooted. We both like our co-owners have experience in mutual aid projects and those kind
Hmm.
of things, and the whole solidarity economy, cooperative economy kind of situation. So it is a little bit of an experiment in co-ownership, but also like uh, what happens, like how do we pay for this, and how do we
Hmm.
facilitate that we can work on this without actually just having money to throw at it?
And
Because
that's one of the
yeah.
other things that I find kind of intriguing too, is that pursuit. Now, if you look at the site that you guys have, and even in the about section, there's a really condensed version of kind of how it came about in the history and like what it came from. And when you dig into those, go into some of those links, if you go further than just the blurb as to it got started because there were members of this, and this, and now one of those being Amped and another one being
Mhm,
Resonance. And if you
mhm,
click back to look at those, it is a lot of not documentation, but like, what's the word? Kind of mission statements,
mhm,
sort of uh, what we plan to do. It's a lot more brainstorming and kind of thinking of a better world music wise, sort of thinking and the really transparent sort of things. And I do like that. And also because you were saying it's like Bandcamp, and the problem being where Bandcamp, they got that venture capitalism and or capital money, and then they couldn't fund it because it's like, oh yeah, we didn't really think of that. Or I don't know, there are a lot of people that build things going, oh, we can do this and musicians can sell their work and we'll get money for it. And it's like, yeah,
Hmm.
but musicians don't make money, and music is now streaming for free. Or
Hmm.
there's really not a write down idea equals pile of money sort of
Hmm.
stuff. So I'm really intrigued by the way that you guys are going about this. I really like the whole transparency thing. So while building this platform, and you said it's only been around for a year, how do you go about doing something like this? What is the concept in how it actually started and you went forward with it? Like,
Hmm.
tell me the origin stories of when you first started working there and what the experience was like for you.
Yeah, so like you alluded to, it came out of these two projects called Ampled and Resonate, and Resonate's been around for like 9 years at this point, I would
Mm-hmm.
say, and has honestly like has a very troubled, complicated history that ties into a little bit of like the crypto stuff and
Oh, really?
yeah, and then like also Ampled came around, I think in like 2019. But a lot of it uh, ran into this kind of um, the need for people to do it full time,
Mm-hmm.
um, and wanting to make it a day job and like making it sustainable. And these are all very like real concerns and very legitimate concerns, like how musicians don't get, a lot of musicians don't get paid. Some musicians are lucky enough to be able to get paid to do what they want to
Right.
do. But most musicians aren't, and they make their ends meet in other ways. It it is something. It's like a valid critique. Like to maintain a platform is a lot of work. Like a tech platform is a lot of work.
Mm-hmm.
And so there were all of these rubs around who's getting compensated, but also if no one's getting compensated, who's making the decisions about what work should be getting done, and if the people doing the work are not empowered to actually make decisions about how they do the work. Um, what kind is that, like cooperative, is that fair?
Mm-hmm.
Who, like, there's just a lot of like very complicated things to think through and talk through, and I think um both Resonate and Ampled like kind of like ran into that wall of um how to grapple with the fact that you don't have money, um while also like staying true to your principles and compensating people for
So
it.
like being in a band.
Exactly. While also, and like actually being in a band is actually a very great example of like doing something cooperatively, right? Like you have
Yes.
bands where you have the person who calls the shots, right? But you
Mm-hmm.
also have bands that are very distributed. Like everyone writes a piece of the song, or like there's just like the way that yeah, and it's like it's a huge lesson of like collaborating with people in ways that are actually not taught to us in like normal society.
Yeah, like it's unlike what you if you're a painter, you can't go, well, three of us are going to hold the brush at the same time and make this painting,
Hmm.
although that would be a brilliant thing to do. But
I,
anyway,
I mean, I think there's people who do that
there
as
might be,
painters.
yeah.
Yeah.
But that is what it's like. It's like several people working on the same piece that comes out as one. And yeah, it's a different way to think.
Yeah.
Short example being, I don't know if I forget the name of the movie, but it's the one where it's an indie movie about a band, but the guy has a giant like paper mache head. I want to say it's Herman, something like that.
Oh, I
Anyway,
haven't seen it.
the entire concept, that part's not important. I was watching it with my wife, and there's this part where this person who wears this paper mache head starts playing, and then the other musicians are listening that first heard it for the first time, and they come up and they start playing on the keyboard with him. And she turns to me and she's like, "Oh, that must be driving you nuts. They're messing with his stuff." And I'm like, "No, that's what it's like. I want that. I love that part of it where it's like, oh, what if this here?" And it's like, yeah. And then you just build off of it. And I
Yeah.
feel like that's kind of like the cooperative that you were speaking of before with, and I realize I called it amped before. Ampled is what I meant to say. I mispronounced
Yeah,
it.
no, that's fine. And well, so we basically like a bunch of people who like had met each other through these spaces started talking about our experiences in them. Um, and we kind of like built this. It was super small. There was like six of us, a collective, and we called ourselves Fun Music Place.
Yeah.
With the
Which is still what
emphasis
your
that
GitHub account is under.
yeah, exactly. And which is like a little bit confusing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but the idea was we're we have a critique of the systems in place, and like part of the critique is also um, actually like wow, okay. Resonate was trying to do streaming. And
Okay.
streaming's not profitable. I mean, Spotify
No.
is not profitable. And you can see that in the way that, I mean, it's very profitable for some people.
Mm-hmm.
But like the company, Spotify, maybe they posted a profit this year, like this quarter or something like that.
Right. But one of the things, and I think it was actually in one of the ampled presentations that was put on the site, is the fact that the actual music streaming part of it that gets paid out is referred to as like part of the cost. It's not referred to as their model. It's like in
Yeah,
here are, cost of expenses, or that whatever
yeah,
they refer to it as, not as
yeah.
actual artists. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And like that's why they're doing the podcasts because they don't have to pay royalties on those. That's
Mm-hmm.
why they are doing AI generated music. That's why
Right.
they're doing the like in-house musicians that they just flood their playlists with, all that stuff, right? Like it is it's not a profitable business.
No.
Bandcamp, however, until as you know, they published their profit statements until 2017, I want to say, and they were profitable.
Yeah.
Um, and so that's kind of why we were like, well, we have, and there was also this aspect of like, Resonate was, I had written a lot of the code for it. So I was fairly familiar with it. And we are like, well, a lot of the components for this thing are here already. We could just like pivot it to be for another thing. And this is the beauty of open source as well, right? Um, and take it and build this other thing under this other like idea with this new proposal. And part of that proposal was we're going to do it as a worker cooperative rather than a multi-stakeholder cooperative. And if we can prove that it's successful and that there is actually like a income stream in it, we're going to see about whether we can exit to community, being like we'll start bringing in musicians or we'll start figuring out ways to do the decision making in ways that are much more like equitable and
Yeah.
responsive to the needs. But in the meantime, the people who are actually going to be doing the labor should be the people making the decisions. And we're trying, like, it is like a explicit decision that we're also making of like creating space for people to give feedback. And that I think a lot of that is done through it being an open source project.
Yeah.
Um,
And the other thing too that I think would be important to a lot of the people that I know in the open source music sort of and Creative Commons space, one of the problems that some of them have with it right now is the fact that the yet third buying or second, I don't know, the Bandcamp was bought again just
mhm,
recently by another company, and they are union busters,
mhm,
and they're not allowing, and that's a problem. Like up until then they were like Bandcamp is what they would use, they wouldn't use
yeah,
any other platform, but
yeah,
now they're union busters, and that goes against their ideals. So something like this, and also the transparency of what you guys are doing, I think that's important to people in certain formats as well, just
yeah,
because that, plus with everything being closed down now and people just buying out companies and doing whatever the hell they want with, I mean, seriously, there's a lot of really, everybody was like, why have a website anymore, why use anything yourself anymore, not you, and now all this stuff is happening. We've got bans, we've got companies being bought out, everything is just really strange in the online platforms right now. So it's nice to see smaller groups of people with transparent sort of ways to
Yeah,
go about it, doing things
yeah,
like this. So it's
yeah.
I feel like you're in the right place and time for what you guys are doing right now, first of all. Now, second, let's get into the actual platform itself. Now, you had said that it is like Bandcamp, and it kind of is. But let's put it this way: it seems on its face. That's a weird way to put that. It seems that it's really more streaming, like you were saying, rather than Bandcamp is still built on downloads, even though nobody downloads anymore. I mean,
Hmm.
they will to support a band, but nobody really does anything with those downloads.
Yeah.
So the platform seems more, it's a streaming platform, but it's really when you get into it, especially when you sign up as an artist, you realize it's more of membership options and merch, like you had said before. So tell me more about the actual execution of what artists can do on the platform.
Hmm. Yeah, so that's interesting that you point out the stream. So it is, we make it fairly transparent. So this is part of the code that we took from Resonate, which was a streaming app.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I had written, and we just took part of it. And so there is a kind of front and center, a player, right? So you click on a song or an album, and it will play the album in its entirety. And um, I've like heard really goofy stories of like people will use Bandcamp in that same way, but
Oh yeah.
they'll have like they'll have like uh it'll be like, okay, I'm playing this music in this tab, and then I'm playing this other music in this tab once it's done. Like they have to basically manage the playlist aspect of Bandcamp.
Yeah.
So we do have that like little bit of like we have a play queue, and that it's we don't surface it, and there's reasons for that. So like the once you start getting into the plays are still technically promotional plays, which is what they are on Bandcamp. Because once they're not promotional plays, you start getting into the space of streaming music and music licensing and having
Mm-hmm.
to report those kind of things. So that actually like it kind of complicates things. Now, the truth is that we have like the infrastructure to set a cap on how many times something can get played, but we haven't actually implemented that yet, and that's just a thing that will end up happening. Like on Bandcamp right now, if you play a song, the artist can say this song can be played 5 times before
Right.
someone, and we're gonna ask people to buy it, right? So we're gonna implement that too, but we just it's there's so many other things to do first. Like Bandcamp's
Right.
actually a very complicated piece of software. Um, uh, but so that's why. And but there is just like there is a little bit better of a I think the user experience around playing music is better, and it's something that we're working on to also just improve in some other places as well. So like if you have a blog post and you are someone who likes writing about music, you can write, you basically have your own blog, you can share your own songs in it, and then there'll be like the way that Bandcamp does in their blog, um, just play the music straight through, right? And so we'll have that functionality as well, but anyone can use it, not just Bandcamp.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, so you join as a musician, you upload your albums, people can play your albums, but there is really, we're trying to put front and center the like idea of follow this musician
Right.
and subscribe to them and give them $2 a month, right? Or like $5 a month, and have that be the way. And then you'll receive every updates. And for musicians, there's a way to say like, if someone follows me at this tier, they'll automatically get anything new that I upload.
Mm-hmm.
So like, you know, I'm a musician and I have this tier and someone's paying me $10 a month or $5 a month, they will automatically get every single new release.
But that is where it does differ from Bandcamp, because now you're talking more of a Patreon model, but a Patreon model that is specifically music based, which
Yeah.
I think is an interesting angle as well, because you can do this on Patreon, but it's not meant for music. But
Yeah.
when you first come, and this was my confusion when I first joined the platform after I had heard about it, I uploaded a song one of our latest songs, just to check it out and see what was in there. And I didn't even realize that because of the layout, it does look like Bandcamp. And I was, and you tie it to a payment platform. I thought that payment platform was just so people could buy the download. And I saw subscribe on there, but I thought subscribe was just like, oh, it's like following a musician. And that was
Hmm.
the confusion I had. And the more when I looked into it, I was like, oh, and then it says subscribes, and then you can choose what the tiers are. And then
Hmm.
that's after I went into it and started trying to hook the things up. Then I realized what it was. But when I first joined, I thought it really was just like a like Jamendo or a Free Music Archive, where it's like
Hmm.
you can upload your music here and people can stream it and download it. Is
Hmm.
what I thought at first. But then I realized the download feature isn't even really part of it until you start subscribing to the band and all that. So that was my first experience with it. So I would say that is the forte on the subscribe feature is really an interesting take on it. It's like an Indiegogo without the crowdfunding. It's monthly sustainable,
Yeah.
and I once I realized that, it made a heck of a lot more sense to me, because that's when I saw the blog posts and things like that, and all
Yeah.
those can be behind the subscription, correct? And you
Yeah.
can have public facing ones.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. You can even say this person, like this tier of people can receive this blog post, but anyone who pays less than that a month cannot.
Yeah.
Um, and that is something we did took take from Ample as well. And like similarly to Bandcamp, Patreon is like a sensible business model
Mhm.
in the context of music
Which
making.
was also started by a musician.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like it is like it is a way. It's like it just makes like the path to making money makes sense. There's not you're not dealing with, and I think this is like a thing that we have to contend with in the music industry. There's so much like uh capital control over music
Mhm.
from these three big companies who just own so much like intellectual property that we like there's no way we're ever going to be able to play Rolling Stones, right? Or like or sell like a Rolling Stones album
Yeah.
on our platform. So you're like who are you talking to? Who are you who like who are the indie labels, who are the small time musicians, and it's like a way to kind of support those people who aren't already making money off of just having made music 30 years ago and it being worth millions of dollars, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I also like the fact too that you do have an option for adding a Creative Commons license to it. As a Creative Commons musician, that's always
Yeah.
important to me. So when I saw that in there, I'm like, there you go. I even signed up for a distributor once because they allowed us to do that.
Hmm.
And I realized after the fact, I'm like, oh, no streaming service that we're distributing to is going to say that this is Creative Commons. So it was just kind of a thing they put in there. It was weird.
Yeah.
And then it disappeared after a
Yeah.
while. Anyway.
Yeah, that's interesting. I I mean that one came and this is the like the community driven thing. Like I had
Okay.
would never have thought to add that, but we've had a lot of people from I would say like the Fediverse, right? Like
Yeah.
Mastodon and those folks, the like decentralized internet take interest in us.
Hmm.
And
Which
that
is
was
where
something
I
they were
found out
like,
about you. Yeah, I found
yeah,
out about you on the Fediverse.
nice. Yeah. So I mean that came from user request and like it is not a hard
Okay.
thing to implement, right? Like on our end, it's just like it's a little drop down.
Right.
Uh and then but like I would have never thought to do that
Well,
myself.
and I will say the benefit of it, especially because there is a very passionate Creative Commons community, and it all
Hmm.
comes from, oddly enough, the era of online piracy of music, when music downloading was a thing. It's so funny. Streaming actually ruined piracy,
Hmm.
and actually made music less profitable for the scrappers. Because when we were having people download our stuff, that was people would seek it out. People were just like, oh, I can download this for free and do what I want with it. And now it's just like, why would I download? Like, we don't get nearly as many downloads as we used to now that people can listen, because it's not how people listen to music. It's a
Yeah.
strange, like, they kind of won the music industry because of this. Anyway,
Yeah.
that's conversation for a different time.
Yeah.
What I'm getting at is having that in there, it makes it easier for people to search for that, and having the ability to even filter songs by that. They're looking for new Creative Commons artists to play on their podcasts, to
Hmm.
share the music with. So there are like listening groups that get together on the weekends on like Facebook groups or or on Jitsi or other sort of video platforms, and they just sit there and play new music that they've listened to on the Creative Commons realm of music. So
Yeah.
having that as a searchable thing, I think, would also benefit if there is a lot of talk from the Fediverse.
Yeah.
Having that searchable by even different licenses, that's actually
Yeah.
important. Some people won't do the full-on non-commercial, non-deriv because that's like just an inch away from being just full-on copywritten to
Yeah.
some people. Whereas I just think the entire concept of it is fine across the board. Anyway,
Yeah.
just wanted to add that in there as some insight as to maybe something
Taking
to
notes.
keep. Yeah, I was wondering if you were. It looked like you were. I didn't know if you were bored or if you were writing something because you were looking down.
I'm a fidgeter, so I will also doodle, but
No,
I am also taking notes.
you don't realize how many fidgeting toys I have around me, so I make sure that I'm not tapping on stuff.
Yeah.
So now, with this being created, I really am. There are a few things that always I want to learn more about. And one of them is creating an LLC, putting this together. Like I get getting in a room with people and going, we should do this thing. And it's like, sure, I could write the code. And what if we put it up here? But putting together an LLC and coming together with a mission statement and a business plan is something where, yeah, I should do that, is what I should say, but I don't. So tell
Yeah.
me about actually like brainstorming this and putting it together. How does one go about this? I'm
Yeah.
curious.
Oh man. So we were thinking about doing this, and at the same time, we were like, well, if we actually want to, I'm the programmer on the team, and the options were basically use Stripe, which is a payment processor, or
I've
use
heard that
PayPal.
it's really easy to work with as a developer using Stripe.
Yes, it's fantastic, and there's problems with it for sure. They are changing. I mean, I think that's a whole other conversation. I could talk about that
Right. Yeah. Okay.
later. And but the thing is that people are familiar with PayPal, but for for a point of view of like we're basically making a pitch, and we want to build a like minimum viable idea, minimum viable
Mhm.
thing. We need to use Stripe, but to be able to use Stripe, you you need to be incorporated. And
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
yeah. Like especially if you're gonna be the payment processor, you don't need to be able to use Stripe if you're a musician
Right.
receiving a
But to
payment,
have it
right?
on a
Like that you're just
platform,
self-employed.
okay.
And that is one of the things we considered. We were like, what if we just put this as like Simon's self-employed, like single person LLC, and then like we talk later about how we go forward. But we were like, no, we really want to start in like the in the spirit of like this is going to be collectively owned.
Hmm.
Um, so at that time there were five or six of us, and three of us were based in the U.S. And we were like, well, let's start talking to a lawyer. We have so I'm in Washington D.C. And we are part like of a community of like a cooperative community here. So there's like people who are the cooperative developers, like people who spend time thinking about worker co-ops, consumer co-ops, all those kind of things. And they recommended a lawyer,
Hmm.
and we went to go talk to them. And we have a blog post detailing this on our blog, but basically we had like two or three consultation calls with them. They were super generous in that time. Though realistically, they were like, you know, put down $3,000, and then we will write. They're not going to write our bylaws for us. That's a
Yeah.
discretion. But they gave us guidance on how to incorporate. We incorporated as a limited liability with three members in DC. And then we started talking to the lawyer about writing bylaws. One of our co-owners, Alex, is very inspired by like sociocracy and non-hierarchical ways of making decisions. Um, and we basically brought that into that whole bylaws conversation. But yeah, so we incorporated as an LLC, which allowed us to set up Stripe. And then everything since that has been just kind of like figuring it out as we
Hmm.
go. We don't have, no one's holding our hands like as much as I think we would like. There are groups that do help with that, but they have limited capacity. And they also like, I think that there is hesitancy within the cooperative space about platform co-ops, simply
Really?
because the idea of a platform. What is a platform, right? It's a business,
Yeah.
but so much of these communities are so not communities. These businesses are dependent on having a cash injection of several $1 million before they
Hmm.
ever become profitable, and I think that there is just like caution around approaching those things, which I understand. Um, and like also people have seen like Ampled not working out and Resonate not working out, and they're just like, what are you doing that's different?
Hmm.
But we've been, like we've been stumbling along for a year. A lot of it is relational, so interrelational, but also relational outside of our group, um, and just like building trust and trying to get on the same page and seeing what the way forward is. I think probably our biggest hurdle was agreement on the legal aspects of like the bylaws, but then also like how do you compensate founders? How do
Right.
you, no one's getting paid, so like how do you
Okay.
actually make it so that people get paid? We did a Kickstarter, which was successful, but not successful like we raised $15,000, which is great, but you can't pay three people on for a year
Right.
on a $15,000. So I work full time,
Oh,
and
you do.
Alex also works. Hmm?
You do work full
Yeah,
time.
yeah.
Okay. Yeah. All
Not
right.
not on Mirlo, on a different thing.
Gotcha.
Like,
Okay.
yeah,
I
yeah,
was, I
yeah,
was
yeah.
like, wow. All right.
No,
Yeah. And well,
yeah.
what
So
about,
like, yeah.
speaking of that, I mean, what about on top of getting paid for creating this platform, the platform itself has to exist somewhere, and the existing platform has to stream music over
Yeah,
bandwidth on
yeah,
servers.
yeah.
So, how are you doing that?
Yeah, so I mean, I can get fairly technical about that. It's also fairly simple. So I'm not a like server engineer.
Okay.
I don't
I'm not either.
enjoy, yeah, I don't enjoy going into servers and like setting them
No.
up correctly. So we just use a service called Render, which basically you tell it what you want and it like manages most of that, and it costs more. It's more expensive. There's like Heroku is a similar service if people are
Hmm.
familiar with that.
Yeah.
Um, and there's like open source versions of these kind of actually, I'm not sure there's an open source version of them. I remember looking for it like 2 years ago. There's like much more like you roll up your sleeves and you do it and it works, but I'm very like, please just do it for me.
Yeah.
Um, and the way, so we use Render, and there's Render handles most of that for us. We're actually in the middle of a migration of moving all of our audio and images from Render to something that's a little bit more like bare bones server,
Oh.
um, just because it's cheaper. So
Uh-huh.
right now we're paying about $350 a month on Render, which we can cover. So we actually, I don't know if you're familiar with the term like self dog fooding, which is this like indie web idea of use the tool yourself.
Hmm.
So we use Mirlo to do our own. We have a Patreon style page, like a supporter page on Mirlo. I mean, we raise, I think it's about $420 right now, um,
Oh.
through that, and it basically covers server costs. Um, and server costs are about $350, but there we can get that down probably $100, like to $150 maybe, or
Okay.
$200, simply by moving to like a cheaper way of storing our files. So that's the main thing I'm working on currently, and that's kind of the big picture architectural situation. Um, but it's all fairly like, I mean, there's a lot of, because of the way that venture capitalism has supported the tech industry, there's actually, you can get fairly far with cheap or free tools. Like the
Yeah.
first few months, we didn't really pay for like even the server stuff, because they're like, you can use this for X amount for free. And then
Hmm.
we're like, oh, people are using this. We need to start paying it because we need to like, do that kind of stuff. But
I, a similar thing happened to me. I've created a method for us to be able to use GitHub to actually collaborate on full DAW files. Like every band
Oh
member could
wow.
download the DAW session with the effects and plugins and everything.
Yeah.
And we could collaborate remotely, which oddly enough, I figured out how to do this in December of 2019. So this was handy because you know what came in February of 2020, and suddenly we were still collaborating,
Yeah.
and we had this method. But what happened is after uploading like our third song with wave files and everything in it, you get a nice little note from GitHub going, "Hey, you're uploading some big files here."
Yeah.
And it's like, oh yeah, got to get. So we had to use the LFS Git sharing, and then now we pay for like, and it's nothing. It's like Well, now we're up to $10 like a month
Yeah.
is what we're at, and we were at $5 a month for the past couple of years. So
Yeah.
yeah, there are ways to do the files and different methods. I didn't look into it the way that you guys did. I just went, what? Oh, it's only $5 a month. Sure, whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Problem solved.
Yeah. We're just doing it for I think, oh, I don't know. I don't know that I can estimate how many, like, several thousand WAV files.
Right. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, it got expensive.
Exactly. And, and I don't want to go too much into, because I find this fascinating, but other people are like, just tell me about this music platform. Because I want to be like, how do you plan to project for this and everything? But you know what? That's
Yeah.
for the boardroom. You and I are
Yeah.
here to talk about this. Let's get into the design of it. So one thing, you were talking about the player before, and you said you designed the player. Interesting thing about it. One is it's one of those players where you play it on the page, thing pops up at the bottom,
Mhm.
and the player's there, and you can still navigate and listen to stuff as you go through the page and look at other artists. Correct?
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, I went to sign in again today because to look at it before our conversation. I wasn't signed in. I signed in. The player popped up, and it remembered what I last listened to on the page. And I was like, oh, well, that's a neat little feature. So I just wanted to tell you that was really cool, first of all.
Great.
And so tell me about the design of this. Now, who are you collaborating with? Graphic designers? Are you literally doing this yourself? Like, how is this going about?
Man. So I am a programmer first and foremost.
Okay.
And I have done like UX work, which is the usability stuff. But one of the things that I have a really hard time with is that when you're like, I feel like the point of collaborating is that you create tension kind of between like and positive tension, right? Like in the sense of like you have different opinions and that forces you to work harder, it forces you to think about things, to think things through. Whereas if you're doing it on your own, actually you're just like, this works, good enough. This achieves the purpose. We have had a couple of people come through with great design and like actual UI ideas. And this is another benefit of the open source things. One of them, well, I'll shout out two of them. One of them is Tim, and Tim is a like a graphic designer and has like worked through the brand identity and like those kind of things and brought them together in that sense. And the other one really need to shout out is LLK, who has been like was at Resonate, helped us with those kind of things, and LLK is not a coder.
Okay.
LLK was like, I have such strong opinions about this. I am going to torture myself and learn how to do this so that I can make this look as good as possible. And
Nice.
like we weren't able to pay people, and there's still a long way for us to go. But like basically the way that it looks now is courtesy of the work that LLK put in and just like teaching themselves um teaching themselves HTML and CSS, and like I'm like,
Right.
wow, this is cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
So it's been a collaboration because it is uh like I'm able to do the bigger like code things,
Hmm.
but the like it's also kind of stalled a little bit since LK is a so like I said, this is not their thing. LK is a working musician, and I put that in quotes only because like they don't they make money from making music, but it's through contracts with uh, working other projects, like making music for audio projects or for games or for those kind of
Right.
things, right? Like the way that like they're able to live off of it barely.
Hmm. Hmm.
So they are a working musician, but it's not through sales from their albums,
Yeah.
which they do have. So they were our first musician on the platform as well, and they trial run a lot of our stuff.
Hmm.
Um, and so yeah, it's just been this like kind of collaboration thing where we're trying to be scrappy about it. Well, we're not trying to be. If we could get paid, if we could pay someone to do the work, then we would love that.
Yeah.
And we've talked about bringing
Again, just like a
in
band, I would
designers.
love to pay somebody to promote our stuff
Yeah,
rather than
yeah,
figure it out myself, you know?
yeah, exactly. Um, and so there's gaps in our like UI, and there's gaps in our functionality, but like we're trying to fix them, and it'll take some time.
Yeah. And it's, I mean, it's a very nice site. It works well. It's not slow. So you've got that going for you. It's not something where people are going to have a bad experience and just wait, it's going to get better. No, it's pretty good right now. It's where you
Hmm.
are.
Hmm.
And thinking of that, so moving forward, how are you working on getting the word out? What is kind of a promotional plan or to really build up the community and actually expand this project? What are you guys looking to do in the future?
Yeah, that's a big question. We've kind of just coming out of a period of some like internal turbulence, like some like we're figuring out how we're working out together. We have like we ran out of our Kickstarter money. We were able to basically pay one of our co-owners significant chunk of money over that time, able to reimburse some of our initial investments. But we did get a grant to put on an event in DC.
Hmm.
Um, so like I am based in DC, and the event will be basically exploring the solidarity economy and music and the music industry and how we're going to call it. I think the name we've settled on is Otherwise Music Gathering. Reimagining the music industry, and Otherwise Music Gathering is the acronym is OMG, so
Oh,
that was
okay.
cute. um, and we're uh, we're going to basically bring people together from DC, but also from different areas, people who've like worked in cooperatives or who have done like music platforms. And that's kind of where we want to like start with some of that. This is going to be in May, at the end of May. We're going to be doing it in a super scrappy music venue here, who are like, yeah, you can use this during the day. Um, and I'm really looking forward to it. It's gonna be, I think it'll be small. Like we're not gonna have like a big, maybe 60, 70 people. Um, but it's just gonna be looking at like how do we actually build community around this project. And
Yeah.
I think the important part of that like is that Mirlo is a is like a little bit of a flag, right? It's like a this is an attempt at doing things differently. And
Mhm.
we're putting that flag in the ground and we're seeing, how it lands, where it lands, what people like. Um, and it could be that like it's not the way to move forward, right? Like it could be that there's other ways of doing it, or it could be that, like it just steadily like grows and improves. We have like I think that it like with there is a lot of potential in the actual product, but I also think like if I'm being serious with myself, right? And I'm like, is the internet as it currently is organized sustainable?
Mhm.
And it's not. Like streaming songs is actually like environmentally really bad, and we that's a thing that we do, right?
Yeah.
Um and so like what are ways to actually organize projects in a way, and I think being open source is like a really critical part of it. And this is now I'm talking as me, I'm not necessarily talking as Mirlo, right?
Right.
And I think being open source is like an important part of this, but it's like, okay, so what does it look like to do something like Mirlo on a local basis? Like what if there is a like a DC Mirlo where people build community in
Hmm.
DC around these things, but it's also a way to pool money, right? So what if, um, right now we take a 7% cut, but what if that was optional, right? Like musicians chose. And what if that 7% went into a pool that we were like, okay, well, we're using this money to buy a music venue that is accountable to musicians, right? Like what's the
Like buy
level up
outright a music venue, or are you saying for an event?
outright?
Okay, all right. I like that idea. That's why I asked, because I'm like, okay,
Yeah,
I like where you're going with this. All right.
yeah, yeah. So I mean, and not like what's it's just like it doesn't have to be a music venue, but like what's the actually like what's the best way to support musicians in your community, which can be international, right? Like that is the case right now, but it also can and should be local. And I think like that's the kind of the question that I think we all should be tackling with, and I think Mirlo helps with that.
You're sparking an idea in me that actually came from another conversation that I had with someone, and it all kind of intertwines. I spoke with a musician out of New York, and he leases a building because he's in New York. There are a bunch of different like foundational warehouses that are emptied out and all that kind of stuff. And he buys the place or rents the place and then separates the rooms into practice spaces for different musicians. And I was like, well,
Hmm.
that's brilliant. And I like that in the sense too, because that funding can go into this, that, and the other, putting internet into the building, having amenities that the bands could have that are also part of a luxury, rather than there are like hourly places that have all that you need for studio recording, but instead have a place where you rent a band space, but the money itself goes into, say, a 24 channel mixing board or a studio room where people could come in and record their EP, book time, maybe even have
Hmm.
money for a, listen to me, I'm getting all worked up over here, have
Great.
an actual engineer in there. And you saying this sort of thing, it's like, yes, it is more than that. Rather than just say buy into this building and the rent goes to that, it's creating a collective or a co-op in the sense that has this, and maybe even buying a building outright, and people could come into it almost like, I don't want to say it's like making it condo, but you get where I'm saying. Like, you're
Yeah,
making my mind open up in that sort
yeah.
of sense, where it's like there's the creative collective. It doesn't matter what kind of musicians you are, you all want to do the same thing. I mean,
Hmm.
promotion is promotion. I've learned just as much promotion from authors as I have from other musicians, because we're all trying to do the same thing, get our creative work out there. And some platforms, it's like, oh, they're doing it this way, that could apply to what I'm doing here in this,
Hmm.
you know. And
Hmm.
you saying that just made me think of that conversation that I had with another musician that
Yeah,
was on the show. And so I like that, and I
yeah,
enjoy that.
yeah. And like I think like experiment. We have to experiment because I mean the truth is that um I mean one of the things that what Cohen or Alex likes to say is that musicians have at various points in time been kind of the canaries in the coal mine for
Mm-hmm.
how capitalism is about to pivot, right? And you see that with like Napster and the streaming economy, and but saw that like 100 years ago at this point with how records became like a commodity and those kind of
Mm-hmm.
things. Um, and I I feel like it is not gonna get better from up top, right? Like we have to
Right.
do it from below. And that means, and because of other reasons, I'm always thinking is like we need space. We need like we need to own property that is like collectively owned and that is like, and you're right, like
Yeah.
in DC there is kind of one practice space and it's a very great space. Like the people who work there are lovely, but it's expensive. Like honestly, it's like an
Right.
expensive place to go practice. And the fact that there's only one in this city of like 500,000 people with actually a really thriving music scene is
Mm-hmm.
kind of like what's happening here, right?
Yeah.
It's just and musicians already also like to be clear, like musicians already do these things, right? You're playing in your friends' basements, you're setting up house shows, you're like doing porch shows. Like this is a thing that like musicians have done for such a long time is to like pool resources in a way. And so the
Yeah.
questions is like how do you do that deliberately in a way that actually is able to be sustainable? Because house shows end like when that people who live in that house get evicted, right? Because the
Right.
rent's going up. Or so like those kind of questions around actually being deliberate about how we decide what we put our money into and how we pool money and those kind of things. And like I like Mirlo is an attempt at saying like, hey, we could do it this way, but it doesn't necessarily mean that this is the way to do it. It's just an idea. Um, it seems to have traction.
Hmm.
People seem to
Yeah.
be into it, and I think we've benefited from the stuff around Bandcamp. Like we there was urgency when Bandcamp was sold to Songtradr for us to actually and that was part of the LLC process, right? It was like, oh, we should do this, because if we
Right.
don't do this now, this is like it feels like a very opportune moment to
Yeah, it's
capture
one of
that.
those things where it's just silently going to be one day like we told you,
Yeah,
everybody was upset when it first happened, and now I feel like nobody's talking about it again. And it's
yeah,
something that any day could just pop up like, we decided to do this.
yeah,
And now you have to pay to put your stuff up here. Whatever, it could be whatever.
yeah.
So, if people wanted to know more about Mirlo and actually join in on the conversation, first of all, where's the website located? Because it's not just a .com site.
Yeah. Turns out that .com would have been very expensive. So it's Mirlo.space, which is a cute little play that we're also hoping to be able to play on at some other, like you
Oh,
own your
okay.
Mirlo space, right?
Gotcha.
But we haven't really explored that fully yet. So it's Mirlo.space, and we have Mirlo.space on Instagram, that you can follow us there. We also have a Discord for which there is a link if you are interested in being on Discord. I know it doesn't work for everyone. Um, and we have our GitHub is also like so all our code is open source. You can see it on GitHub, and you can pitch in, look at it. You can explore all the musicians that are on there. We'll add functionality to search by Creative Commons once
Nice.
this
I like that.
migration's out of the way. And yeah, that's the pitch, I guess.
Great. All right. Well, I want to thank you so much for talking with me today. It was great meeting you.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. Thanks for having us on and reaching out and wanting to talk.